podcaster, and I lost your. Oh, there you are. There you're back. So I'll let you introduce your credentials about your podcasting experience.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jules Scott. I've been podcasting for 6.5 years now. Holy crap. It's weird to say that out loud when you because I've been doing it, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. And so I am the host of Heroes News with Jules Scott, which is a Heroes of the Storm news and interview podcast. I am the producer of the E-League Report, which is owned by Turner Broadcasting, and I got started on my journey with a little podcast called Torn Think Tank, which is a advice and support style podcast, like a Dear Abby style podcast for gamers. That was my very first one. That's where it all started.
And that's you just released episode 290 for that one?
Yes, as of like tonight,
Wow.
We'll be recording episode 291, which is insane.
Yeah, and to have that many episodes, I'm guessing that's been where it all started.
Yes. My very first foray into just doing anything podcasting was Torn Think Tank, and kind of going back a ways to where I got started. When I was little, I wanted to be on the radio so bad. It was like the dream. I used to have, so I'm a little older than the normal gamer crowd. And so I used to have one of those cassette recorders, like the old, like square cassette recorders. No, it was like the ones where like they did dictation on, like the old ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
From like the 70s. And because I'm 44, I'm actually 44 years old. And so in my childhood, what I would do is I would record interviews with my sister, and we would just like interview the stuffed animals, and it would like, be on the radio. And I had a Teddy Ruxpin doll. I don't know if you remember those. Those would like, they would like say things back at you, and I would improv off of the Teddy Ruxpin. I wish I still had those tapes because they were hilarious.
Yeah. The Teddy Ruxpin just had the cassette player in its back, right?
Yes. And then it would just like, you'd say something to it and it would say something back, and then you just, it was interesting. Like it had like this free mode that it would just do things like that. Now I don't know what it would be, but Teddy Ruxpin was where I had my little interview things and on cassette tapes. And then I went through school, and I realized the broadcasting school wasn't in the cards for me because it was too expensive. And then the whole like, honey, you should do a career that's going to make you money kind of thing. That was not radio. So I went the corporate path. I worked for a Mattel-owned company for a while. I was a manager. I worked for startup companies, all this stuff. But podcasting started with a friend of mine who I was raiding with in World of Warcraft. We were in the same guild. We were dealing and leading a team together, and he had just gotten an iPhone. Didn't know what it was. I'd had my iPhone for a couple years, and he had just discovered podcasting. He said, Jules, I want to know what podcasts you listen to. And so I gave him like a list of podcasts, and he listened, and then he texted me and he said, I want a podcast. I want to make a podcast. And I responded like that. And I said, I am in. And we had no concept. We had no idea. We had nothing, but we decided that we were going to learn and figure it out. And as it turned out, because of all the kind of guild drama that we had this big guild, and then there was big old drama, and we decided to move into our own guild. We decided to create a podcast that would help other gamers in World of Warcraft focus on some of the interpersonal stuff. Because like the game is an interpersonal microcosm of life.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't even, if you're not like, it was just this weird thing where we were like, we could give advice to people about their raid team or their guild management. And so we just started the show. We did our first episode. I was on a dinky little headset mic sitting on my bed with a laptop, and it was so clunky and so awful. And but we did it. And then a couple listeners caught us, and they started writing letters to us about, kind of what we expected. And it didn't take long. But then we started getting letters about depression and social anxiety. And it was, I was getting letters from soldiers who were listening to the show overseas who were talking about PTSD. And
wow.
Very, very wild, different, experience. I have a psychology degree, but I'm no psychologist.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, how are you prepared to handle some of those heavier topics? Like, and what was that reaction like? Because I mean, without it being like your specialty or really understanding the issue, like how did you feel like you could actually address those letters? Because those topics are so personal.
they are. And so I wound up starting to pull in some experts to the show on a semi-regular basis. We would have guests like psychologists, psychiatrists. Um, we actually had the soldier with PTSD come on the show and tell his story.
Wow.
It was super powerful. And I guess as an individual, as a person, I've always been the kind of person who just people talk to, and I've always been kind of the sage advice girl. And my co-host at the time was more of the comedy guy, so we had a lot of fun. We had, it was this, but we were able to like have these really touching moments and then have comedy and comic relief and things like that because we got along really well. And so that was how it all got started. And then from there, I started working with a couple of like people just started networking, and I started getting into more of the new style podcasts, getting invited on the show as a guest to talk about the game, World of Warcraft at the time. And then over time, it's evolved to like all the Blizzard games. So, yeah.
And then how did you get in contact with E-League? Because that's a relatively new thing, isn't it?
So kind of. So the E-League report, which it is now, was previously, it started back in 2016, 2015, I can't remember, under the name Rally Point. And it was Brian Huff, Seven, and another very well-known podcaster named Scott Johnson, who is a friend of mine, and he is the Frog Pants network of shows. And they started from Turner Broadcasting. They began the show there. The show was then rebranded to Nerf This, and it was just Brian and Seven at that point. And then Turner had come in this last year and said we would like to bring in our name to it and become the E-League report, put our name on it for E-League. And so it just got rebranded a couple weeks ago, and with the support on there. And how I got involved is literally a contact from Brian Huff, who is one of the hosts of the show. I got a DM in Twitter. I was at my sister's wedding last year. And I was at my sister's wedding. Brian and I had never met, and he said to me, "Hey, Jules, I had heard about you from a number of different people. I was thinking about doing some other projects, and I've heard great things about you, and I'd like to meet you and get to know you better." And so I was like, okay, well, yeah, let's talk. When I get home, we set up a meeting. We got to know each other, and that other project didn't stick, but we became friends and we became colleagues. And then he was telling me about how they were doing certain segments of the show. And I said, hey, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a huge Heroes of the Storm competitive esports fan. And if you ever need somebody to contribute to that for the show, hit me up because I can help you out on that because I watch so much esports for Heroes of the Storm. And a month later, he called me up and said, you want to be on the show? And so it took me having to take the initiative to say, hey, I want to do this. I'm interested in doing this. And so that's how it happened. And then over time, we've been working together on a couple of different things, kind of helping shape the show during the Turner thing, renegotiations. And then they said, well, we don't really have a producer. Would you be interested in the job? And I was like, what does that mean? What do you want me to do? And I had already been doing a lot of the work in another capacity for a different show. So they said, you're hired. And I said, okay. So, nice. So I'd actually been doing the job for like 4 or 5 months prior to the announcement hitting a couple weeks ago, because I didn't want to put it out there and then say, oh, by the way, the name of the show, like I wanted it to all be at the same time. So we have the new name, we have the new role. It's pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome. Now, along the way, in your experience, you've clearly dealt with different types of shows. Yes. Now you have the interview show, you have the news show, and also being an interviewee yourself, hosting guests, networking, and all the work that goes on behind the scenes to get a podcast to go through and be quality. What are some of the biggest struggles that you've had as you've wanted more for your podcast? Because eventually, I'm sure you got away from that dinky headset when you were doing Tar and Think Tank, and
Yes.
you had those certain markers of improvement that you realized, oh, this is becoming bigger, or this is really a big change for the better. What were
Yeah.
some of those moments for you?
So I remember going back to when I was working with the Convert to Raid podcast. That whole story kind of began as like I was connected with Pat Crane, who was the host of Convert to Raid, and we became friends and colleagues, and we decided to start a show together. It was called That TV Show, and it was a very different style of podcast than I'd ever done for Tor and Think Tank, because mainly it was just like, hey, hi guys, we're here. We're going to just like kind of banter. And this show was now talking about the news. And I had the worst time in the beginning to learn how to introduce the show, because we would do like a little pre-roll before it started.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be starting up and saying, in this episode, we'll be talking about blah, 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 blah. And I could not get the cadence. And he was so pissed at me all the time. He's like, you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. And I'm like, I don't understand like what you're saying to me. And he's, and so he had to kind of drill it into my head of like how to do a proper introduction, which I really had never done. So now when you listen to Heroes News, some of that skill that I've learned over time is there. It's just that cadence, the way to introduce something, the inflection of your voice, the way something is kind of hyped up in there. So when I talk about in this episode, we'll be talking about this kind of HGC thing. And by the way, you got to keep the change of voice that goes in there so that you keep your audience interested.
I have to admit, like getting the introduction phase right, like now I'm doing like a music intro and highlighting different guests each week, so there's a different song each week just to kind of do a social media push, and then introducing my guests after I've already interviewed them and just kind of giving the synopsis of and I'm like, okay, I'm getting the right structure. But I've been taking the habit of listening to my podcasts again after like a week or so, and it's like my voice drives me crazy. It's so monotone. And so now I have to like change my posture while I'm recording just to get that change in my voice, because I have no vocal awareness whatsoever.
Yeah.
So and I mean, just your little pretend introduction, right, that you just did, I already heard so much more inflection and better pacing and better delivery. I'm like, I hope I don't have to wait 6.5 years to get there.
It's a lot of practice, a ton of practice, and you're doing it absolutely correct in that you're listening to yourself. Yeah. I will tell you in the beginning, that is the number one thing that taught me how to be a better speaker, was to listen to what I sounded like after it was recorded. Mm-hmm. Mainly just because everybody who does this has crutch words. My crutch word is awesome. I guarantee you I will say that word at least 50 times, because I can't stop. It's just part of my vernacular. It's like when I talk to people. And so I'm aware of it, but I'm really trying to work on not saying that as much in my interviews that I do with people. And so I'll do the interview and then I'll like edit that out. Because otherwise it's just there. And it's annoying because I don't want to be the girl that has all that. I used to have a lot of ums in my speaking. That I had to stop doing that because it's not very interesting to listen to, and it took me a long time. It was a lot of practice and a lot of like, oh, I hate how I sound in that. I got to do that better. Or did I really say that? I don't even remember saying that.
Yeah, I've found that when I'm getting into those ad-lib moments of trying to connect thoughts and put actual meaningful words to them, it's just a struggle. And sometimes you go down that route of trying to say something really insightful and then you lose it halfway through. And then that recovery of, I just lost everything. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I do recommend also going to improv classes. Something that I had done when I was younger really helps me to be able to talk on the fly, because
Yeah.
oftentimes you don't quite know where you're going when you have a thought,
Right.
right? You're just kind of going, and then there'll be moments where I'm like, where are you going to end up with this thought, Jules? Like,
Yeah.
where are you going?
Exactly. Or like you think your guest is saying something and you're like, I have a question about that, but what are the words that connect that question to the context of what was just happening?
Exactly. It's tough. Interviewing somebody is very difficult, especially when you are pulling information out of them. I will say for me, my interviews with commentators, with like casters and Twitch creators are the easiest interviews ever because these people know how to talk.
Yeah.
And then you get to a pro player and they don't really know how to talk, and it's just like extracting information out of them like with a syringe. And
Yeah.
it's tough. It's a tough role as a podcaster. And I will say to you for this for sure, I am still learning as an interviewer. I am not even close to where I think I want to be, because really I've just started really exercising this skill back in July of this year.
Okay.
And I go back and I listen to the early ones and I go, oh, you sucked. Like and it wasn't like, my bosses at Heroes Heart, they're like, that's great. And I'm like, nah, it sucks. I don't like it. And when you see what I can do now versus what I did then, because I'm really hard on myself too. But so that's how it is.
I think that filter of being hard on yourself is actually really good as long as it's still being proactive, because it's giving you things to change and address as opposed to just being like, I suck.
Yeah, no, I got over the whole like you suck and there's no coming back from you, because in my life and my career especially, I've been through a number of really tough bumps, this year being one of them. And prior to all of this stuff that you're interviewing me about, if you had talked to me 5 months ago, none of this existed. None of it. And it was a very different landscape for Jules Scott during that time. And I had to recover from it. I had to come back from it and realize that the dream that I had set for myself, and that the dream that I thought was going to be the thing that I was going to do for the rest of my career, is gone. And how am I going to recover from this? So.
Yeah, I feel you. I actually lost my job back in July.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same. I
So,
mean, July 1st, I was unemployed.
yep. I think I was June 24th or something like that. So, hey, I mean, for me, it was that panic of how am I going to support my family and find that job? Like, I was lucky enough to have severance in the games industry. That's just not usual. And I mean,
Right.
everything with Telltale that's gone on, that it was just, how do I support podcasting while I'm taking care of something that's a much bigger priority? I ultimately just made the call that I can't give podcasting my attention at that time, and focused on finding a job. And I'm thankful enough that I was actually able to get one. And it seems like you were able to land on your feet as well.
Yeah, my landing on my feet was the creation of Heroes News with Jules Scott. And that was a dream that I had had for a long time. And it just, so my prior employment, I was working for a company called Signals Media, which was it was the Convert to Raid podcast, the network of shows. And what we had built was this massive community in World of Warcraft, 7,000 people in a guild, a community. I ran a party that was attended by 2,000 to 3,000 people at BlizzCon every year. Crowdfunded the whole thing. I mean, that was my nice. World. That was my job. I was the producer for the show. I was doing all that stuff, and I loved it. It was awesome. And then it was gone. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'm a huge Heroes of the Storm fan. I have been since it started. And I saw the Heroes community and I knew some of the folks in it. But the only thing I can use to describe it is I kind of felt like I was looking through the glass wall with my face pressed up against it, wishing that I could be on the other side.
Yeah.
And no one was really no one knew about me as the podcaster. No one really understood what I was doing. And so I said, if I'm going to do this, I have to do this myself. And the podcast idea came from another project that we were doing with the E-League report. It's something called Esports Daily, something we came up with that was on Monday through Friday, short form broadcast of just the headlines of esports. So you need something quick, you need something easy. We're going to do this. We figured it out. And it was also to utilize the Amazon Echo platform, which does these things called flash briefings. If you haven't heard what they are, 10 minutes are maximum. And then you can just use your device to play them for you. And like, BBC and all these news outlets do it. It's kind of your way to like listen in the morning and get all your news and then do your thing. So we thought, we'll leverage that. And I used that idea and said, Heroes of the Storm does not have that. They don't have that thing. So I I kind of put together an idea. And at the time I had had a meeting with the owner of Heroes Hearth in a previous venture, nothing related to this. His name is Workhorse. And I said, I'm going to ask him for a meeting. I need a partner. I need someone who can help me promote this. And they don't have a podcast. I fill a niche for them, and so I'm just gonna pitch this. I don't know where I got the courage to do this, but sent him a DM in Discord, and I said, hey, you remember me from this meeting? He's like, of course, I love Jules. And so I told him, I said, I'd like to have a meeting with you about this, and he's like, absolutely. And we sat down for what we thought was going to be 30 minutes and wound up talking for 2.5 hours.
All the good conversations go that way.
They do. And here's the weirdest thing in the entire world. I live in Minneapolis. He lives in Minneapolis.
Done deal.
Right. I mean, like crazy. So he's like, I love this idea. Let's do it. And you should do interviews with the community, with the people that are making stuff within the Heroes community. And I went, like, yeah, that's not what I planned to do. But he's very good at bringing out the talents of people and recognizing when someone is capable of doing more than they think they can. And so that was where Heroes Knows was born. And it was a fantastic venture. It has been a fantastic venture. I get to interview some of the most prominent names in Heroes right now. And they are actually excited to hear from me, which is incredibly weird. When I had Trixler on the show and he congratulated me on all my success, and Trixler and I met like once or twice, but really didn't know each other. I've mostly been in his stream, and he's like, you've been doing such great stuff. And I'm like, you listen to my show? Like,
you know me? Yeah.
You know who I am? And yeah, it is. I've just been absolutely blown away by my own capabilities too, because that's where it all turned around. And then that one little meeting turned into an inner circle kind of invitation by Workhorse, and later just, hey, I want you to work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a fun journey, just to go from something with a friend and raiding to like covering deep topics, very personal topics, into basically being welcomed into your second passion of like your big gaming culture that you're really into. That's pretty exciting.
And I will tell you this. I mean, none of it. I mean, I got lucky 100% I believe that, but none of it happened because I sat back on my butt and did nothing.
Yeah.
I made sure that I screwed up all the courage and shut down all the anxiety and just said, I'm going to do this. If I want this, I have to go get it myself. Yep. And I think that is the best lesson that I can offer to people is getting started, not to be overly desperate about it, or it's to make the connections and then ask for what you want.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's echoing all the advice that I've heard about from whether you're listening to Rick Fox of Echo Fox, or you're following one streamer or another, or an esports player. How they got started is that they were just doing. And all the creatives that I've met, all of the game developers I've met who weren't just like, oh, I know I'm going to do this. They got started by trying it and staying consistent with it. And I mean, that's all the advice that you can give someone is do it, and then do it consistently. And then if you want to go that step farther, fill your time with that thing until you are an expert at it.
Yes, and don't give up. Like it's gonna get hard. It's not gonna. It's not all roses and happy places when you start doing this, because it's frustration. I've lost friendships from people that I worked with because it happens. It's not easy. And there's been moments where it was like that turning point where you're like, is this going to am I going to continue to do this or not? And then the choice was always yes, I want to do this. But for some people, I like doing this because it's fun and it's a nice little hobby, and that's great. I have like more power to you. But if you want to do this as a career, as something that is a long-term thing, you got to work your butt off, because I definitely have.
Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the like longest nights that you worked or hardest nights? What was the biggest moment where you're just like, I have just killed myself over this project?
So this is a great story. When I was working on Convert to Raid, actually I wasn't even on the show. But the host, Pat Crane, he was going to travel for 3 weeks to Italy. And in podcasting, missing 3 weeks in a row is really kind of death to your audience, because you need to make sure you're producing a show. And the show was him and 2 other guys. And the show, he wanted to keep producing the show. And he asked me if I would host the show for him. And the guys would kind of do their thing, and I would just make sure that the technology, the recording happened. And now I am still a noob when it comes to technology of anything audio, and because he has sounders that played through the stream and all this thing. And so he sent me all this equipment that I had no idea how to use.
Oh boy.
So, so we figured it out through Skype. We kind of get everything set up. But the only way we can get it to work is that each host has to record themselves.
Nope.
And we have a backup recording running through. If you're a gamer, you remember Mumble.
Oh yeah.
And so there was a backup recording coming through Mumble, which is like a really crappy VoIP program. The audio quality was crap. And so, but it was there as a backup. And we do the show, and then at the end of the show, one of the hosts swears very loudly. And I said, "What? What?" And he said, "I never pressed record." So what I had to do was I had to merge my track, the second host's track, and then I had to drop in the mumble track of this guy speaking and mute and unmute the mumble track every time he spoke. It took me 8 hours to edit that show.
No.
8 hours to edit that show, because it was a 2-hour show, and it was listening to every moment of the podcast to see where he started speaking, when he stopped speaking, unmute, mute, cut. Oh
no.
And at the end of that, I was like, I am done. I'm done. I'm never doing this again. And it was just like, yeah, but man, I learned a lot from that experience.
I had a very similar one maybe a month ago. I was doing a recording with Grand Canyon University's esports, what's his title? Coordinator. And we started the recording, and I did my sound check and everything, but I never listened to it back. I saw on my digital audio mixer, that my mic was being picked up. I'm like, okay, it's working. Apparently, my mic wasn't actually recording. It was being picked up on my headset mic, and my mixer defaulted back to that. And so I'm like, okay, my mic's reading great. The guy can hear me on Discord, so I thought everything was peachy. record the hour-long podcast. Think, okay, I'll have time in like 2 or 3 days to edit it, get it ready, and put in the music, all that stuff. I go to listen to it. I can't hear my voice at all. I hear clicks and pops, and I'm like, well, what can I do about this? I can try and redub what I said to get that answer, But that's an hour-long interview of impromptu questions. And I was like, I got maybe 5 minutes and I'm like, there's no way I can do this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll salvage the clips of his audio and I'll turn that into like social media posts and stuff like that. And I started working through it. It's like, but without any sort of setup or context to it, there's just some clips that just didn't work. I had to reschedule the interview and we basically redid it again. And it's like, man, audio technology is so foreign to me. And now with that microphone screw up, I am so paranoid every podcast that I go into. And right now having to trust Skype is just like a deep prayer for me right now.
Yes. And you know what? When you make those errors, you'll never make them again, because it is ingrained in you after that. So that was probably the worst one that has ever happened to me.
I feel your pain so terribly badly. And I could only imagine what a 2-hour podcast would have been like, and then working your way through that.
Yeah, and then because I was muting and unmuting the track on different parts, there was a part where I didn't unmute it after you get done with 8 hours of editing, going back and then re-listening to it was like, I'm just gonna post it because it's got to get out, and I didn't unmute a certain portion of the track, so we started getting messages and emails that there was like this blank space of someone I'm like, oh man. So all that work, and I still hadn't done it really well, and they didn't know what happened, and so it was just, rah rah rah, why is this I was swear why is this crap, and and so it's sometimes a very thankless job, but you do what you do because you love it. And there's been so many amazing memories that I that overshadow any of that stuff. I can't even, I can never stop.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about those moments, I'm sure all of them have come from connections that you either inadvertently made or you directly reached out to try and make. What's the one that surprises you the most that worked out outside of reaching out to Workhorse?
It was Brian for sure.
Yeah.
It was Brian Huff, because his was out of the blue, but we've run in similar circles and never met. Mm-hmm. And I think that is another piece of advice that I would give any moment of every day, is that your reputation matters. What you say matters. How you treat people matters. And I have seen it many, many times where, maybe the public doesn't quite know what's really going on behind the scenes, but the ones that are doing the job, the podcasters, we talk. Yeah. We tell each other who to stay away from and who's awesome. And that's something that has been very important to me. I've had a couple of times where I could have fired back at somebody who came for me, or I could have made a statement about blah, blah, blah. No, and I've chosen not to. I've always stayed the high road. I've always been the person to try to stay positive and not, smear the internet with a bunch of negativity. And it matters, because that contact that came from people saying, you need to talk to Jules Scott because she's awesome, is what he told me. And I was like, damn. That's cool.
Yeah, when someone says you're awesome, that you're just like, whoa, I didn't think I was at that level. That's a moment that you'll kind of just cash in and be like, wow, someone else has validated you.
Yes. I mean, Workhorse had told me when people started learning that I was working with him, they actually took the time to reach out to him like on their own and tell them, great pickup. And like he told me that, and I was just like, yeah, reputation matters, and what you do and how you treat people, it matters. And so that is 100% the things that, we all mess up, we all say the wrong thing, but if you can claim it, if you can be the person who just says, you know what, I did screw up and I'm sorry, and be better, be better than you were yesterday, That is 100% how I would recommend anybody to run, because you are a business. As a podcaster, you are your own business.
Yep.
So yeah,
everything you do is you branding. Like, as much as I've put a name to the podcast and a name to my social media, all of it comes back to my real name. Everything comes back to who I am, and the world and everyone listening or talking about you isn't going to differentiate between the podcast you and real world you, or online you, or gamer you. It's just you.
Yeah.
And so you really have to create the right conversations about yourself.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
No matter what subject or group that you're talking about, whether it's esports or casual gaming or mobile gaming, it's all related. People will talk about you, and it will get around, and people will know you.
Yeah, and reputation, you may never see it. You may never see the conversations, but they happen. Mm-hmm. And you want to be on that side of people saying, "Oh, that guy, he's great. Like, definitely would work with him any day," because that's who you want to be. You want to be known as the person who is great. And and that's just it all comes from how you treat other people in this industry, and how you behave on social media. I know that people say, "Oh, it's my social media, I can say whatever I want." But I'll tell you what, I see people out there and I'm just like, whenever we meet in person, I'm like, yeah, you're kind of crappy on the internet. I'd have that impression. And then you have a drink with someone and they go, "Yeah, so and so," and they go, "Uh-huh." And then it's just that, and you know exactly what that is. You're like, "Oh yeah, I like that too about them." And it's pretty wild.
So let's jump around back to your other passion, Heroes of the Storm. I'm curious, who's your favorite character to play?
100% favorite character to play is Deckard Cain.
Nice.
And it's like, he's relatively new, but prior to Deckard, it was Stukov, because I love Stukov. And but yeah, I'm a healer all over. That's been my. And then if you have to make me play DPS, then I'm a mean Li Ming, and I will cackle every time I snipe somebody. That's what I do.
That's actually kind of funny. Our styles are very similar. I fell into supporting in Heroes of the Storm, and so I was a Malfurion Lucio player for when they were in the meta quite a bit, and I still like to goof around with Lucio, just booping people into really bad situations. But if I have to DPS, I'm a Chromie main.
Oh, so. Chromie's good. I suck at Chromie, but I love her. I think she's great. But my aim is so weird on her. I don't know why. I can't seem to stick very well.
There's something about her that's just working for me, and it's just like when you can get like six of the sandblasts in a row, and it's just that good feeling of casting into the dark where you have no vision and you hit someone. It's like, oh, I read that right, and there's so much validation about how you play Chromie that it's so rewarding, more so than I think like seeing like your heels jump on Stukov and then detonating them at the right moment. But
yeah. My favorite with playing Deckard. So I like to take the expanded healing potions at 13 sometimes, so that the little like dinky healing potion grows into a bigger pot. And because I play quick match with my friends a lot, so I'll just kind of futz around with talents. And we play with a guy from New Zealand, and he's like, "Jules, you've put on the cranberries. The cranberries. I love cranberries." So now every time I look, it's like my pots are cranberries.
What's your favorite map?
Favorite map? Towers of Doom. I used to hate it. I used to hate Towers of Doom, and then now it's got so much fun, different styles you can play it. Plus, it's got amazing comeback potential. I will and always will hate Dragonshire. I've never liked Dragonshire just because I feel like it's a whack-a-mole map. So just like I can, every time I play quick match, it's usually level 13 before somebody gets the Dragon Knight, because it's like, oh, we just go, okay, I'm going to the top. Okay, we're going to the bottom. I don't like it. So I will say Towers.
I can definitely feel you, especially in quick match when it just feels like the matchmaking or the compositions just favor one team in holding the shrines, and it's like you're just
Yes.
constantly panicking back and forth. Don't let them get the shrine. Don't let them get the shrine, and you're just rotating. And it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like you're really learning what the rotations need to be. And
Ah,
I mean, that's probably just
whack.
quick match as well.
Yeah, it's just whack-a-mole to me is what I call it, and it's just not fun. So yeah, I actually do like the new Garden of Terror. I hated it before, and now the new Garden of Terror is pretty nice. People kind of griped about that the other night when I was recording up. I was a guest on another show, and people in the chat were like, "I hate the new Garden of Terror," and I'm like, "Why? It's great. I like this." So
I'm waiting for Blackheart's Bay to get a redo.
that map drives me bonkers because of the pathing. The pathing makes me crazy.
Right?
I
Right?
can't stand it. So yeah, I mean, I can deal with Blackheart's Bay. It's not too bad, but it's definitely like, Dragonshire is my least favorite.
Yeah. Well, I'd want to give you an opportunity to do a shout out for everything you're doing, where people can reach you, listen to you, talk to you, and if there's any last tips or tricks that you want to shout out to folks, whether they're starting podcasting or trying to get into esports, what do you got?
So, I mean, I was not an esports fan prior to Heroes of the Storm. And the way that I became an esports fan was by immersing myself in it. I just became immersed in it. And now I report on all kinds of esports that I never even knew existed before, 2015. Doing segments about CS:GO and Dota 2 and League of Legends, talking about worlds and all that stuff. And it is about just studying, immersion, just going to the events if you can afford to, and being and being really open-minded and just learn about what's going on. Ask people for help, watch the streams. That's how I got in. And I will say that sometimes it becomes a little more difficult. Like with Heroes, I started when it was in the beginning, so I have enough OG knowledge of everything to make people go, oh yeah, you're definitely kind of an expert, right? So it's harder when I go into things like League of Legends where I'm like, I don't know this game at all, but I know who these people are and I know what the history is because I've studied it. It takes time, and it does take time. If you ever want a podcast about it, then you just have to, you have to take your lumps. You have to try. You have to put together an idea. And that's the biggest thing about podcasting is just finding your niche and your strength of what it is that you do. Torn Think Tank was appealing to my strength, which is my ability to empathize with people, to give them advice, sometimes tough love. And then I realized I had other skills besides that too. So it was like, yeah. And that's just those are the things that I would say if you're out there, just do it, try it. I've written a short little blog series that I'll be adding to, and it's on heroeshearth.com. It's called Two Content Creators with Love. And it talks to you as a brand new content creator, getting the idea started, why change is really good to your content when it's warranted, and just how to come up with your idea, how to shape your idea and make it yours and appeal to your strengths. So I would say definitely check that out. I'm always on Twitter. I mean, I can't respond to a lot of stuff, but I have to spend a lot of time on Twitter because that's where the news is. So I am Jules RPG on Twitter, and my DMs are open. You can message me anytime if you have a question about podcasting or esports or just want to shoot the breeze. And I will be at BlizzCon next week. So if you happen to be at BlizzCon and you see me, please say hi. I love hugs, and yeah, and happy to answer any questions. I will be glued to the Heroes of the Storm stage, so that's where you can find me.
There you go.
Yeah, that's probably the best way. And then heroeshearth.com, I am there. You can follow my profile there because I'm posting a lot of stuff, and it's got all my links to all the things that I do: Esports Daily, eLeague Report, Torn Think Tank, my chainmail stuff that I do on the side. Yeah, I'm kind of just a busy, crazy person. So.
Well, you got to keep trying, right?
Yes, new things, always doing new things.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this cast with me. It's been really helpful for me to hear someone else's perspective as they've gone through it, and just hearing another gamer go on about their journey and what they're passionate about. It's been really exciting to hear. So thank you so much. And here's hoping that you and I interact some more on Twitter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invite. It was an awesome time. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks. See you later. Stop.